Hey everybody, it's so good to gather and know that you're joining us from your groups. I'm just so encouraged to know that these groups continue to run every week. You're doing what few other people would do, and that's getting beyond the negative effects of physical distancing brought on by COVID-19 and sacrificing some of your personal preferences about what church is to still create communities where people can be known and loved and encouraged in their faith. So thank you so much for encouraging me. I'm just so privileged to be part of our community. If you're like me though, there's still something that does long for the old days, longs for, being with everybody in a large gathering, worshiping together, having fun and talking together, seeing our kids run around. I would just love to see you. It's interesting though, as I think about it, it'd be nice to see anything beyond the camera. You see, I need glasses, right? That's why I wear them all the time. My eyes, as they are, I can kind of see things in front of my face, but once I start to get a few feet out, they get blurry, and well beyond that, it's just shapes and outlines for me. My glasses bring the world into proper focus. I'm able to see things as they are. These lenses have been designed to correct the wrong way that my eyes see the world and to help me to see the right way. I miss things when it's just my eyes, but I pick them up whenever I have my glasses on. You've probably spent the last 10 to 15 minutes wondering why in the world we all created these gaudy kids' sunglasses, and I'm going to tell you here in a moment. But first, I want you to think, do you remember the past 2 weeks, how we've been studying Galatians and talking about the Christian gospel? Do you remember Paul's words to the Galatian churches, and in turn, Jesus' words to us today? These glasses that we've just created are intended to be a visual symbol of the message of the gospel. Through faith in Jesus, God offers everyone the chance to become his children and to live in a permanent, secure relationship with him. When we really stop to think about this, it's absolutely incredible news. But I think if we're honest, that it's only incredible news if we also believe the other news. Here's what I mean. We're only really, truly happy to receive God's love as a gift if we believe that we can't earn it on our own. Enjoying a relationship happens only when we've tried to find satisfaction and security and fulfillment in all these other things, only to discover that they leave us just as empty as when we first started. Receiving forgiveness and being free from guilt and shame only comes when we believe that we're guilty in the first place, that we haven't honored him as God's, that we haven't prioritized his laws. We can't be forgiven if there's nothing to forgive. The gospel requires that we believe and we admit the bad news about ourselves, about the brokenness that we've caused in our relationship with him because of our sin, and how our sin then, the brokenness that we experience with God, has then impacted everything else. But the gospel also guarantees that in spite of all that, we're forgiven and rescued and freed. Just like looking through these lenses helps me to see my world correctly, the gospel is the lens by which every follower of Jesus sees the world correctly. If we want to be clear on our existence, clear on how to interact with other people in healthy relationships, clear even on how to see ourselves in healthy ways, we need to put on gospel glasses. This is our lens on the world. And so before I go any further, I invite you to go ahead and grab your gospel glasses and put them on. It's okay if you can't see me, just listen, but make sure that you get plenty of photos of your group, take screenshots of your Zoom calls, because I want to see how everybody looks right now. I'm sure it's an amazing sight. So let's think about these gospel glasses for a second as you put them on. On the one hand, we deserve nothing on our own. In fact, Paul wrote in one of his other letters that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and that the wages of sin is death. When you think about a wage for a second, if you're running a lemonade stand, you provide lemonade and then you get a wage, right? You get a payment for that. If you're working for your parents doing chores around the house, you mulch the beds or pull the weeds or clean the floor or put the dishes away or whatever else, the wage that you get is your allowance, right? For some of us grown-ups, we've earned wages for the work, the performance that we offer in our business or our organization. So when Paul says the wages of sin is death, in other words, our performance, our sin deserves something, and it's death. And the Bible talks about death being in two dimensions. First of all, physical death. I mean, it's no surprise to any of you that every single one of us are going to die. But the Bible says that our sin doesn't just cause physical death, it also causes spiritual death. And spiritual death is complete separation from God. The fear, the aloneness, the sadness, the insecurity that you've ever felt in your earthly body, multiply that by 1,000,000 and have it last forever. And that's what spiritual death starts to feel like. So when we write on this lens, on this side of these gospel glasses, that we deserve nothing, it's true. Based on our own performance, because of our sin, we don't even deserve the next breath, let alone a deep, lasting, life-giving relationship with God. But on the other hand, we've been given everything in Jesus. We've been given physical and material blessings like beating hearts and lungs that give us the proper amount of air. Our bodies are working. We're given friends and family and homes and cars and jobs and income and all these things we get to enjoy. But we've also been given the even greater spiritual blessings of internal, deep safety and security with a relationship with God. A God who loves us, a parent who's better than any of us earthly parents could ever be. Hopefully you think these glasses are fun. Maybe some of you think they're funny. Maybe some of you feel a little childish wearing these, but the intention is for you to feel childlike. Because again, the most true thing that can be said about your identity, if you're a follower of Jesus, is that you are a child of God. So every time you look through these, you see the world through the gospel. On the one hand, you can't be proud, you can't judge other people because you deserve nothing on your own. But on the other hand, you can't feel bad about yourself. You can't carry around guilt and shame because you've been given everything by the God of the universe. Now I'm going to put my regular glasses on just so that I can see again. But if you want to keep your gospel glasses on, by all means, please do. I also want, you young kids, if you want to use this as a time to move on to other things, that is totally cool too. So this dual reality of the gospel brings us to today's passage. And for the time that we're going to use it in our discussion groups, I just want us to focus on one verse. After Paul's accepted by the church leaders in Jerusalem, they send him off to continue sharing the gospel and establishing churches all over the first century world. And on his way out in verse 10, Paul tells us that the only thing they ask that we should do is to continue to remember the poor, the very thing I had been eager to do all along. Now, many commentators believe that what was happening here was that the Christians in Jerusalem were dealing with famine and food shortages, in addition to the daily ridicule and persecution that they were undergoing for believing in Jesus. Now, there were a number of wealthy Greco-Roman communities that Paul had been to, and in turn, he had formed relationships with people of means, people that had food and money to spare. And so the church leaders in Jerusalem were saying, hey, because we're all a family, because we're all brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of God in Jesus, let's band together and share our possessions so that nobody goes without. Paul responded, of course, helping the poor, especially the poor who are my family, is a thing that I've been waiting to do ever since I got here. As I was reflecting on this passage this week, and in particular this verse, I have to say they came as incredible words to me. If Paul was telling the truth, and I believe that he was, what he says, his attitude that he expresses, it's absolutely amazing. And I have to be honest, it really challenged me. Eager to help the poor, like is that true of me in my life? If I'm honest, I have to say that it isn't always. But I sense that the Lord encouraging me and leading me, that it has to become my life. And I think that it's probably fair to speak for us all that this has to become our community at Sycamore. I tried to transplant a tree earlier this year in late spring, and when I first put it in, it looked pretty good. It even flowered for a little while, but then the heat hit and it died. I know that it's been dead because it hasn't had any leaves on it for the past 2 months. Now, you know as well as I do that leaves aren't what bring a tree life, but leaves are one of the signs of a tree's life. Jesus said something similar in Matthew 7 when he said that bad trees produce bad fruit and good trees produce good fruit. In the same way, caring for the poor, any good thing that we would do, is not what brings us spiritual life. We might feel good about ourselves, but any good acts don't have any power to add a day to our lives, nor to secure God's favor. No, caring for the poor is one of the signs of our life in Jesus, if in fact we actually are finding our life in Jesus. See, when Jesus comes to you and forgives you and saves you, when you choose to stop ignoring him or pushing him away, when you get real with your sin and admit your need for help, and when you accept his grace by putting your faith in him, everything changes. Everything changes, and it changes from the inside out. I said last week that both identity, that's who you are, and activity, what you do, matter in the Christian life. But I said also that identity always comes before activity. And we see it right here in Galatians. Paul has hammered the fact that what we do has no power to make us right with God. We're saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. But now he's showing that a life that's truly changed by the gospel sees the world through gospel glasses, right? In other words, it sees the world as it actually is, and it lives differently because of how it now sees the world. More specifically, a life that's founded on grace is marked by good works, and that includes caring for the poor. Now, there's so much to say on this topic, and we're going to get into it more next week, but I want us to begin wading in today. And so here's what I'm inviting you to do in your groups this week. During your discussion time, I'd like you to consider 3 questions and talk about whichever ones are most grabbing your attention. The first one is this: what are the barriers to caring for the poor in your life? Barriers might include fear, right? I'm afraid of reaching out to somebody who's different from me. It might be time. You know, my schedule's so packed, I don't have any time to engage with the poor. Maybe it's mismanagement of personal resources, right? I don't have any spare money. I don't have any spare possessions to give away, right? Or maybe it's that I don't even know where to start. I don't know what organizations to partner with or who I would even go to serve. The second question is, what are the opportunities for caring for the poor in your life? These are going to start with identifying, the flip side basically of all the barriers. So identifying what resources do you have that you could give away? What organizations do you know of that you could partner with? What specific people in your life are poor that you could start to engage and love and serve? And then the last question, how do you sense God leading you to care for the poor? Now, I just want to encourage you and kind of take the pressure off. We're not going to solve all the complexities surrounding poverty in our own community and certainly not in the world in this one discussion. But I just want you to think about what might be the first step, right? Even if it's a baby step, what's the first step that you can take to serve the poor? And then my challenge for you for this coming week is that in every one of your homes, I want you to take 10 minutes with the people that you live with every single day. I want you to pray for the poor, and I want you to consider what it is that you can do. What's the simple, practical thing that your home can start doing to love and serve the poor? Get creative with this. Seek the Lord in prayer, and then bring your own personal passions into the discussion and see where God leads you. A community with Jesus at the center is a generous community. A community that doesn't hold on to anything what we have because we know that we've been given everything. And the God who would give us everlasting life, the God who would fill our hearts and our souls, the God who's given us the biggest thing, surely he's going to give us the little things like money and food and housing and jobs because of his love. Our vision at Sycamore is to create communities that change the world. But in order to do that, we have to be changed first. Real, powerful, lasting change starts in each one of us as the gospel works its way inside out. So let's live in the truth of the gospel this week. That though Jesus was rich in heaven, he sacrificed his position and became poor and came to earth, and he suffered and he died on our behalf so that we could share in his wealth. Let's start right now by being honest with ourselves and with each other, and then let's invite him to change us this week so that we can be a community that puts his love on display to the world.